Welcome to Career Tools. Today's topic, resumes for graduates. Here we go. Well, Mark, this cast is another in the series of resumes for particular professions and stages in folks' careers. We've done others, and today we're going to talk about new graduates. And a lot of new graduates can find creating resumes particularly difficult, right? It's a little bit different. There's lots of conflicting advice out there to begin with, and frankly, some of that coming from their own schools, which makes it even harder to cope with. And then there's the
Should I do my rant here now about why we shouldn't listen to career services? No, I won't. No. But yeah, you're right. Schools give bad advice about resumes.
And what you're supposed to do, you're supposed to start to go on the rant, and then I stop you, and then think people like me for having stopped you.
Not going to do that. I'm learning. I'm growing. I'm changing for the better. So, yeah.
Yeah. So then there's the lack of work experience that a lot of graduates have, right? That makes it hard. The lack of perceived accomplishments makes it difficult for folks.
Yeah.
So with this cast, hopefully we're going to make it a little bit easier.
Yeah, this is another cast that falls into the category of in the land of the blind, the one-eyed person is king or queen, because as we know, resumes are so terrible that you don't have to be very good to be better than everybody else, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And taking that a step further, you don't have to go out of your way trying to be unique or different. Your resume ought not to be unique or different other than in the quality of the things you've done and how well you've done them. That's the only way to make your resume stand out.
The fact that it's a well-written and effective resume will make it different enough.
Make it stand out enough.
You don't have to write it on pink notebook paper, right?
Okay. Exactly, yeah. Okay, so we've got 4 recommendations. The first one is there is some standard guidance, some straightforward guidance. We recommend you follow that. We'll cover those things that apply to recent college graduate resumes as well as more experienced resumes. Number 2, your responsibilities and your accomplishments can be small. One of the problems that fresh college graduates have is they compare themselves to somebody with 5 or 7 years of experience, and they say, my accomplishments look so secondary. So unimportant, and that's not necessary because you're not being compared to somebody with 5 to 7 years of experience.
That's right.
Number 3, you can absolutely include non-paid work, and we'll tell you how to do that. And then lastly, please don't include your interests. Absolutely unnecessary. Oh, people say they like it, and that way at the end of the day, the recruiter can say, oh, you remember him, he's the kiteboarder. Well, no, if you're good, you'll stand out. You don't need to be differentiated based on your interests.
Good.
And unless you have 500, the chances are you're not going to connect with the recruiter you're talking to. And it's that first interview that matters. So It's a shot in the dark. It's not worth it. Fill it up with other good stuff.
Okay, so you say follow the usual rules. So I suppose you're going to say like 1 page, reverse chronological order, with each role having the administrative title, responsibilities and accomplishments, all the things we've talked about in the past.
Yeah, you say it here. But you say it like it's like, oh yeah, that's boring. Yeah, of course. But you don't see the resumes that Wendy and I see, right? I mean, I got a resume recently. It was 11 pages long. I got a resume sent by someone quite senior at a Fortune 50 company, and it was 2 pages long. The person was 35 years old, and I would say there were 50 bullets on it. All of them were responsibilities. None of them were accomplishments. And he actually had a segment called accomplishments, another portion called recent accomplishments. It was impossible.
So are you suggesting I've never seen a resume like that?
This is a cast that we have to announce that Wendy has expired because she read the resume and then her head exploded. So rest in peace, Wendy. Yeah. No, but you're right. Yeah, you're right. Those things you said. 1 page, reverse chronological order, each role having the title of the job. It starts with the dates that you had the job, and then the title of the job, and then the company, and then a paragraph of responsibilities, a prose paragraph of responsibilities, followed by bulleted accomplishments. And if that's uninteresting to you folks, that's fine, but it's a bit like asking your uncle who works for the railroads about a career in technology. You're not likely to get good advice. And a bunch of people who don't know how to write resumes talking about how to write resumes is a bit like a bunch of guys getting around together who've never played pro football, critiquing Peyton Manning's, performance on Sunday, right? It's the whole Monday morning quarterback thing, right? No offense to Peter King. So the key is the normal rules, right? And I want to make another plug here. Folks, the way you make your resume good is the quality of jobs you've had and how well you've done them. Again, quality of jobs you've had and how well you've done them. Now, you might be saying, gee, that doesn't leave me a lot of leeway. Those things are already decided. Yes, you're right. In fact, your resume can't make you appreciably better than you actually are. It can make you a lot worse if you don't tell people how well you did. And quite frankly, when people do resumes, Mike, I honestly think a lot of people do their resume and discover they don't have a lot of stuff that makes them feel good, that may say, I really stood out. And if there's something really good that stood out, they put it on there. But there's a lot of other stuff that's just kind of fluff because they don't have metrics. They haven't tracked themselves. So what we want is good jobs and in reverse chronological order, positioned a certain way. And of course, our previous podcast, our original podcast about an effective resume has that. Now, don't worry, fresh college graduates. We're not throwing you under the bus there when we say good jobs because remember, we're comparing you to other graduates, not comparing you to somebody who has 5 years of corporate experience. Okay? Also, let's make it clear, we treat our education like a job. Okay? So it will go in the body of the resume if you're a recent college graduate. Now, just in case everybody didn't hear the title of the show, this is only for recent college graduates. Okay? Everyone else, you only get one line for your degree, even if you're first in class at Harvard or Oxford or whatever, and it goes at the bottom of the page, whereas now we'll give you some specific guidance about how to do a fresh college resume. And so at the top of the page, your name centered in bold. Underneath it, centered, your address, and this is not in bold, your address, your cell phone number, and your email address all on one line. You're probably going to need to use 10-point type to get all that information to fit on one line. But I want to make a point here. Line control and something called widow control, which is one word of a sentence hanging over on the next line, is very important on a resume. A bulleted accomplishment that takes a line and a half better be the best accomplishment you have, 50% better than an accomplishment that can get on one line. You see
right.
what I'm getting at?
Simple math.
Yeah. So you don't want that other half of a line that you could have given to a completely different accomplishment having gone wasted.
And that's the great thing about this cast is because we're talking to recent college graduates, they'll actually understand the math and we don't have to spend 5 minutes on it.
So nice, well said.
Those, with 5 years out, they've probably forgotten all that.
What about the English majors, though?
Yeah,
the poets.
They're in trouble. They're still smarter than us.
Yeah, they're smarter than us, but maybe not on the math part. Okay, so look, again, 10-point type. It has to be there. This contact information has to be there, folks. And you don't put your home address because somebody else might be able to answer the phone. And by the way, on your cell phone, you need to change your message so that it sounds professional. You can't say, yo, you've reached horse dog, right? It's, you've reached the phone number, you've reached the cell phone voicemail of Mark Horstman. And so on. You have to professionalize it. The moment you have a resume, the moment your cell phone number goes in your resume, you must professionalize your voicemail.
Yeah. And your friends may laugh at you.
Yeah.
So what?
Yeah. You'll get a job and they won't.
And then you can laugh.
And then, who's laughing now, right? And you've got to put that information, but you only want it on one line, and you can go as small as 10-point type. Otherwise, you're wasting space, as we said, that could be dedicated to your work or your college experience. Okay? Now, right below that comes your most recent role. If in fact it's, you've been out of school for maybe a year or so, or your college experience. You write the month and year you started, like 10. You could write OCT space 2010 or OCT apostrophe 10, and then a dash, and then the month and year you finished in the same format, unless you're still there, in which case you write present. Then you list your job and the company name, whoever you worked for. If you're writing about your degree, you give the degree title, the subject, and the university. For instance, BSc, Business German and Business Information Systems, University of Central Lancashire, or BSME, United States Military Academy, West Point, New York. Okay, you underline in bold that whole administrative section, which describes the time you had the job, the title of the job, and who you did it for. Lots of resumes we see don't underline in bold. They underline or bold, or they use all caps instead. Underline in bold is the best way to make the heading stand out and give the reader a very quick understanding of the structure. If you make it clear that there's a thematic similarity to every single time you bold and underline, and we're recommending you only bold and underline the administrative portion of each of the jobs, they can quickly, somebody can see that, assimilate that metadata almost instantaneously, and then know they can quickly read through your job titles and so on. We've tried it a number of different ways, folks. As I say, Wendy and I get hundreds of resumes all the time, and this is the way we found that works the best, and that's tested by recruiters too.
Now, people might ask, particularly recent college graduates, why that is so important. But folks, the recruiter or the manager is looking through hundreds of resumes, and you don't want yours to be the one that they're struggling through. You need to make it easy for them, or they're just going to put you in the trash can. I'm sorry.
Yeah, here's the thing. People have been watching, this is not a rant, it's a very soft rant. People have been watching too much TV, and everybody thinks they're an advertiser. And what they do is they think they should make their resume more of an advertisement, more marketing, more polishy, more sparkly. That's not the answer, folks. Okay? You don't want a resume that's sparkly. You want accomplishments that are sparkly in a fairly plain resume. The answer to a recruiter or a manager looking at your resume for 15 seconds, and you can cite 10 if you want, or you can cite 30 if you want. The whole point is it's not very dang much, okay? If they're only going to look at it for 15 seconds, the sparkliness, they will then try to avoid seeing and fight through it. You might think, well, they'll pick up my resume if it's sparkly. Look, the issue is not picking it up. They're going to pick it up. And in 10 or 15 seconds, they're going to try to gather some data. Sparkliness is not what they see. Okay, what they look for is heft, is weight, is quality, is the right jobs done exceptionally well. And so you don't want to focus on marketing the resume more. You want to focus on getting them more information of interest to them faster. And this meta communication, using the right fonts and bold and so on, is a way to make it easier for them as they look at it to go, oh, boom, there are the 5 jobs. Okay, that makes sense. I see the progression. I like what I'm seeing. Let me read the responsibilities. Okay, that makes sense. Those are jobs that I understand. Let me look at the bullets. Oh, wow, he did it pretty well. She did it pretty well. She did it pretty well. Boom. Now we've got an interview.
Yeah.
As opposed to, oh, it's cute, but that doesn't mean I'm going to spend an extra 10 seconds. In fact, once the cute wears off, we look at quality again. If the metadata is not there, if I can't find the quality, I think, somebody who was weak and tried to make it pretty and sparkly, and I see the weakness after the sparkly goes away, and I'm done.
You're done. Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. For each role, you need a responsibilities paragraph. If you worked in a bar, okay, and let me just be clear about something, because people ask me this all the time. It's okay to have worked in a bar. It's okay to have worked till 2 a.m. Now, to be fair, for your interviews, folks, if you got a 2.0 GPA, it's risky to say when they ask you what your GPA is, you don't say, well, I worked full time. Actually, when they ask you what your GPA is, you say my GPA was 2.0. And then you could then say, and part of that was because I worked full time in order to pay for my schooling. But it's okay to have worked. In fact, we prefer to hire people who have worked. Ideally, we prefer people who got 4.0s. Perfect GPAs. I mean, for you international students, that's straight A's. That's all A's. That's a perfect score on one's grade point average in terms of testing. We want somebody who got a 4.0 and was president of their fraternity or sorority and worked full time through school
and captain of the football team.
Yeah, exactly.
If we can have it all.
Yeah, exactly. Why? And look, since there are people like that, that's who we want, right? People think that's a myth. Well, I know guys like that. Okay, not me, not you, but there are people like that. So you need a responsibilities paragraph. Okay, if you worked in a bar, it might say something like responsible for serving alcoholic and non-alcoholic beverages in licensed premises for up to 400 customers per night. Set up bar before service, cleared and cleaned bar after service, balanced and cashed up the register at the end of the night. Okay. If you're writing about your college experience, that paragraph, it would say, followed a course of study to meet degree criteria. Studied business German, business information systems, including international considerations in IT, influence of IT on the workforce, accounting, economic theory, and translation. Depending upon the role you're applying for, you'll emphasize different aspects of your studies. Even for college students, we recommend you have a core document that you then might choose to change slightly depending upon whether you're applying for an IT job that you're interested in or a business job that you're interested in. Not that IT is not business, sorry. If you hated SQL programming and never want to do it again, don't list it unless, of course, you're applying for a technical job and you did well in that particular class. Emphasize the things you do want to do and which are relevant and those which you have done well. Okay? Remember, it's one page. It can't capture your entire life. It can't. So therefore, by definition, it's a matter of choices. And then, for each role, for each job, if you will, or each role, you're going to need a list of accomplishments. The most powerful way to write accomplishments follow our recommended verb result method formula. In other words, you start each accomplishment with a verb: achieved, managed, enabled, wrote, reduced, increased, things like that. Then give a result, what you actually did with that verb, and finally how you accomplish it. For example, achieved 100% accurate end-of-shift cash balances by using self-devised checklist. Okay? In other words, first verb, then what you achieved, and then how you did it. Or you could say achieved 95% pass rate in all end-of-semester exams by devising and implementing a revision program. Okay? If that sounds a little corny, that's the way you learn how to write resumes. Okay? You start small. Okay?
Now, folks graduating from college, recent graduates, their accomplishments, they may not have been terribly big or important or, or
Can we change that? Can I edit that a little bit? They
Certainly.
They not only may not have been very big, they are by definition not big, right?
Compared to what they're going to do later in their career? Absolutely.
I just think what happens is...
But it's compared to what they're going to do in the future.
Yeah.
Compared to other recent college graduates, they absolutely can be significant.
Yeah. And what happens is people get this complex about them being not as big as somebody 5 years later who have more, who've literally worked and are now making
created
double.
a $10 million product.
Yeah, exactly. And so what they do, that complex causes them to lose sight of what the resume is supposed to be, which is an accurate document, which is persuasive, right? It's persuasively truthful as opposed to truthfully persuasive. And so what they do is they start thinking, I got to make it more sparkly. I got to cover this up. And look, recruiters and managers see that all the time, and they're trained to look through it. That's why companies that are hard to go to work for give multiple interviews, and they screen resumes very, very carefully, trying to get rid of all those people who might be a little bit thin underneath the surface, even if on the surface they're sparkly.
What do you think is the most prevalent mistake out there? Underselling oneself, less accomplishments, right? A minimal number of accomplishments. They could have put 10 and they only put 5. Or is it the sparkly, overinflated, hyperinflated?
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest mistake across the board with resumes, there are so many. So this is only a plurality answer. It's not a majority because so many of them are so black and white. Oh my God, I'd never hire this person. They just made one of the top 10 mistakes. And you can find the top 10 mistakes just by Googling top 10 mistakes on resumes, right? But the biggest single one is bullets that are responsibilities, right? Remember we talked about meta communication, right?
Yeah.
There are 3 parts to every job. I'm going to take a minute here. Resumes are so important. And they're so easy to do well, and they're so easy to keep current, folks. And then you mess it up, and you don't get a job, and you get bitter, and that's no fun. Each block, each time period on your resume has an administrative section for the job. As we said, dates, title, company you work for, or school you were at, right? And then a responsibilities paragraph, and then accomplishments. Okay, and if you'll go to the website and look up, see the sample resume, you'll see immediately the resume will jump out at you as being similar in each of its blocks, and the metadata are super, super clear, right? The responsibilities paragraph happens in a certain place after the underlined and bold administrative data, and then the accomplishments. The single biggest mistake that I see rampantly is I could characterize it as the absence of responsibilities paragraph, but people would argue with me on that because they'd say, Mark, look at all my responsibilities there, see all these bullets of responsibilities. And I'd have to point out, I didn't ask you whether or not you had responsibilities. I said, the problem is responsibilities is bullets, right? Or, yeah, I know it's the absence of the responsibilities paragraph, which metadata speaking is, I know what that is. It's just your responsibilities. And as we say, we want to know what jobs you had and how well you've done them. And what they do is they break up their responsibilities and make them bullets, right? And all they have is
no
bullets.
room for accomplishments.
Right, yeah. Now, sometimes they have accomplishments in between the responsibilities, but it's moot because I read 6 or 7. You have used a structure which professionals know, the structure of bullets, and the professionals know that on normal, effective, not normal, on abnormal, but what we consider effective resumes, bullets are reserved only for accomplishments. So when you put your responsibilities into bullets, and I'll tell you in a moment why responsibilities and bullets are really, really terrible. When you do that, you don't have room for accomplishments, right? And even if you do have some accomplishments in there, if I randomly look at 6 and 3 of them have responsibilities in them, I don't see the other.
Yeah.
Or even if I know that they're accomplishments, I immediately discount them because I saw 10 bullets. I now know at most 5 across the board are going to be accomplishments, and they're probably not going to be any good. How good could they be if you have to use time when we're asking you about how good your accomplishments are by filling it up with responsibilities?
Yeah. Well, this is where your head explodes. It becomes so difficult to read the resume.
Yes.
It becomes so difficult to call out the accomplishments that you frankly give up because you got 100 to get through. So
and I don't know. I actually think that the history of responsibilities as bullets is something along the lines of somebody saw a resume with a lot of bullets and said one of 2 things. That's a great resume. They've done a lot of stuff. I need more bullets. And so they literally threw their responsibilities into bullets thinking that would do it. And of course, it messes up the metadata, the meta communications, which completely screws up the recruiter and the manager, and they consider it toast and they round file it. But the other piece, here's what happens, folks. If you haven't heard me say this before, great. If you have, I apologize. I've said it a couple times. I'm pretty sure I said it in the previous cast about resumes. Here's the danger of responsibilities as accomplishments, as bullets. We look at 2 things in your background: what jobs you've had and how well you've done them. We want people who have had jobs that prove to us you can do our jobs and that you've done them well. We don't just want experience that matches. We want experience at a high performance level that matches, okay? If you had a job and I had a job and I got fired and you didn't, okay? In other words, I had no accomplishments. I didn't do anything terribly well. I would, if I needed bullets, I could only use my responsibilities. Okay. On the other hand, if I did it the way I was supposed to, if we had the same job, your and my responsibilities paragraph would be largely similar, right?
And without the accomplishments, there's no distinction between the two.
Exactly. And because I know I have to have accomplishments, I therefore put my responsibilities into bullets. Okay. What we're saying is, if we see responsibilities as accomplishments, as bullets, masquerading as bullets, we assume you could have gotten fired because that's what people who get fired do. They have to fill it up with other stuff, and so they move their responsibilities into bullets. And it's just terrible. And I think we've said an awful lot. I know Wendy's talked to thousands of people about resumes, and the simple fact is there is meta communication in your resume. There's 3 parts: administrative, responsibilities, paragraph in prose, and then accomplishment bullets. And you start messing with that, and any sparkle you put against that is outweighed immediately, and you go to the bottom of the pile, or of course to the round pile. Now, that said, taking that to the extreme, some young person, recent college graduate, saying, I haven't done anything good, I can't have any bullets. No, that's not true. We do see lots of resumes from young people with practically nothing on them because they don't feel that they've achieved very much. Because again, they're comparing them to the 25-year-old, right? On the other hand, we also see the opposite. Minor accomplishments disguised by really grandiose language, and neither one of these choices are effective. Okay. Now, Wendy has told me the story of one of her favorite interviews ever. The 16-year-old who came in to interview wanted a summer job at one of the museums in town. This is during Wendy's period when she was recruiting for a municipality in Great Britain. He came to the interview and told her about his job in a pizza parlor. He said, I started doing little jobs, and when I got better, I was allowed to do the more responsible stuff. Holding back, Wendy asked, okay, what jobs do you do which were more responsible? And he said, well, initially, I just washed up, and then I was allowed to put the tomato sauce on the pizza. Okay, now, it's a cute story, and as Wendy tells it, it's a very sweet young man, very nice young man. I got to tell you something, though. I bet you there's two crowds of people out there listening right now. The first crowd is like, what a joke. No big deal. Nothing, right? Every single recruiter, every single person who's done a lot of hiring say, I like this kid. I don't have a lot to go on. So far, though, I like this kid. Why? The fact is he started out washing up and he got moved to tomato sauce. And he was proud of that. That says something about him. Right? That says he did a good job washing up, that he showed himself to be dependable. He was probably on time at work. He was trustworthy. He was willing to get stuck in doing whatever he could do, and he was capable of learning new things. It says he wants to do a good job and he cares. Now, would we be more likely to hire somebody who has internship experience working in a pharmaceutical factory if this is a job working on the line in a pharmaceutical factory? Sure. But that doesn't mean because you're fearful that somebody out there has that direct experience and you'll never get the job, that therefore you should try to put a shine and a gloss on your resume. No, be proud of what you've done, say clearly what you did, and allow us to draw the conclusions. And if you got promoted to put pizza sauce on something and you're only 16, God bless you, good thing. I want to read about it. And I'd be willing to bet you if I give you a job, you're the kind of guy who comes in early, stays late, does a little bit of extra, cleans up, and everybody kind of, he doesn't have much of a degree or he doesn't have much of a background. He doesn't look very good on paper. But man, you give the guy something to do and he does it. Yeah. And he asks what he can, and he comes back and he says, I'm done with that. Can I do more? I mean, he'd never fit in a union, right?
Well, what's the option? If that's what you've done,
right?
What's your option to leave it off? And if you're going to leave off any accomplishments you have, then you might as well not even do a resume. Matter of fact, you might as well not go get a job.
Right. The question is, remember what I said earlier, we're not trying to be truthfully persuasive. We're trying to be persuasively truthful. In other words, the core of the resume is truthfulness. If you've done it, it ought to be on there, right? Now, if it doesn't put you in a good light, we don't recommend deleting jobs entirely, but you certainly wouldn't put down on your resume that you got fired, right? You would be truthful about what you did and how well you did it, and you may have less accomplishments than somebody else, and you want to be persuasive about it, but ultimately you're going to be truthful. He did it well. I love people who recognize that's a very powerful thing. Now, okay. Yeah. So the point we're making here is the responsibilities and accomplishments you list don't have to be that big. They don't have to be contributing millions of dollars to the bottom line, folks. Okay, did you tidy up the stockroom? Did you make it more efficient? Okay, we want to hear about that. If that was in your job title, or if that was in your responsibilities and you did it well, and they gave you another one to carry out, then you want to put that down. Did you always finish the washing up by the end of the shift? If you always did, tell us that. Did you never break a glass when you were serving drinks and every time somebody else broke a glass, it was $12 and the manager got mad? Okay. Were you the one who was trusted to cash out at the end of the night or to lock up at the end of the night? Which for college kids is usually a pretty big deal, yeah. Right? Yeah. Did you have a knack for getting customers to take out credit cards from the store because you had built a relationship with them when you were glib and kind and so on? Could you get the stock out of the back room and onto hangers and fasteners faster than anybody else? I mean, when managers say to me, I didn't have any accomplishments in college and now I'm having trouble quantifying mine, I'm thinking, you know what? If my manager complimented me several times on the fact that I got stock out of the back room faster than anybody else, maybe that's not quantifiable, but it sure as heck is an accomplishment, right? Actually, several times is an accomplishment, is quantifiable. What the recruiters are looking for is evidence that you understand in your place in the organization and that you understand how you can make things better. It doesn't matter what job you had, all things being equal. The question is, how well did you do it? Yes, if you're applying for a job in a pharmaceutical factory and you're competing with somebody with pharmaceutical factory experience, yes, you're at a disadvantage. On the other hand, if they did a crummy job and you did your jobs great, believe me, the starting position in a lot of companies for fresh college graduates doesn't require relevant experience in the same industry doing roughly the same job, right? That's not what companies look for out of colleges.
Well, it's not the definition of a starting job.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You might only be a waitress, but if you worked out how to take an order in 10 seconds or less, that's probably an entire extra sitting for the company at the end of the night, right? In terms of table turns, right? You might be the only person, or you might be only the one who does the photocopying of the customs forms. But if that job is done quickly and efficiently, and your boss says you're better than the 5 previous people I had put together, then that should be a quote on your resume, right? And if the number of parcels that got sent out on time improved while you were there and you were part of that team, you can say contributed to a team which improved shipment rates from 98% to 100%, something like that. I mean, yeah, you can put that on there. Yeah. And People don't because they think, well, shipping rates or it's just a small shop or whatever. Well, okay. And you did it. And that's what you got. That's what you got to work with. So put it up there. And if you lose the job, you don't get an interview. It won't be because you didn't do your job well. You can't change your jobs now. So you have to be persuasive and truthful about what you've done.
Yeah. And if you're a new graduate and you're searching for jobs and accomplishments, it doesn't have to be paid work, right? It doesn't include non-paid work. You can include voluntary work, work experience in internships, school positions on your resume. There's a number of things. They don't have to be paid for.
And in fact, because your paid work is usually limited, right, you need this extra stuff in order to give a more complete picture of you to the person who's looking at it.
After you've been out in the workforce for 5 years, and
that goes away.
You probably don't get this
exactly
anymore,
right. Yeah, by then you need to have had hopefully you've had enough work experience to fill your resume with the paid work experience. So keep that in mind. You need to be putting time on your resume, on your calendar once a quarter to say, I need to update my resume, so you can drive that non-paid work off of your resume.
Yeah.
But you include the non-paid work exactly the same way as all your other roles. A line of administration saying how long you had the job, what the title of the job was, and who you did it for. And then that's underlined in bold, a responsibilities paragraph in prose, and then a bulleted list of accomplishments following our recommendation.
Good. And you said earlier, no interest, right?
Yeah.
Chess club captain.
Oh, no, chess club captain. No, that would be...
That'd be leadership experience.
Yeah, yeah.
So, photography. I like photography.
No.
I wouldn't put that on there.
No.
Even though it suggests that there's attention to detail when I'm doing my Photoshop stuff, all that.
Yeah. Here's what I've seen in 30 years of looking at resumes. First of all, they're all basically the same. There's a rare exception. Somebody says something weird. And weird, I don't mean weird in a bad way, but like spelunking. That's kind of cool, right? I might ask a question about spelunking. Although generally I find there's probably only one interest listed where somebody's really excited about talking about it. And if I get into a 3 to 5 minute conversation with somebody about an interest, it's probably because they don't have a really strong resume and I'm looking for something, hopefully, because maybe I like them in the first 30 seconds. And so I'm willing to ask a question about it. But there's not a self-respecting recruiter I know who would hire somebody based on their interest.
Well, look, even if you were truly interested in spelunking and you had a 25-minute conversation about spelunking and you didn't get a chance to talk about the concepts, you may like the guy or gal, right? But you're still not going to hire him.
You better be communicating brilliantly, naturally, comfortably for a job that requires brilliant natural communication skills so they can say, wow, this person's just a natural. I really like talking to them. And maybe then, because we have 3 more interviews you have to go through, I'm not worried about passing you along because you just stood out to me in a particularly good way. But that's a shot in the dark that somebody would be interested in spelunking, as opposed to what we see all the time. Interest, music, running, hiking, boating. Okay, yeah, great.
Exciting.
I mean, I have a bet that I could probably list 10 things on one line if I used 10-point type, and I was careful, I was judicious with spacing and so on. I could pick 10 things that 98% of the adult population of the, let's just say North America, there would be something on there. Great. You have interests that I see everybody has. I just don't see it. And it's a line that's wasted, right? Yeah. People use it to pad out a short resume, and it's totally inappropriate. Employers don't want to pay for you to have fun. They want to pay you based on the value you can bring to them. It doesn't matter if you like knitting or baseball or bungee jumping. Believe us, the value judgment you place on any of those is not the same as that of the hiring manager. A completely geeked out resume with member of the football team on it, we know you only put that on there to prove you can work in a team, okay? So that's not terribly exciting to us. Use the space you've got there at the bottom, if that's where you're going to put it, to go ahead and describe responsibilities and accomplishment for a job you were in. If that means adding more to all your jobs, fine. Now, look, folks, you don't need to fill up the entire page. You can go a couple of lines away from the bottom, although you could probably also pinch in the margins just a teeny bit. But look, if you're in your final year and you don't have enough to fill in a one-page resume, listen to us now. If you're in your final year and you don't have enough to fill up a one-page resume following this guidance, go out and volunteer somewhere because, as we said, you can include non-paid work, and that would be volunteer work, right? Be the treasurer of your sorority, get a job, and treasurer of the sorority would be a job.
That would be non-paid,
absolutely. But usually, those fraternity and sorority jobs in the U.S., they get some deduction against their rent to the fraternity or sorority house. So that would essentially be in a form of paid. You would list it as unpaid. But be the treasurer of your sorority, get a job in a local cafe, get a job in a halfway house, get a job in a food kitchen, in a food pantry or something like that where you're sorting or you're meeting people or something. If you don't have enough to fill a one-page resume, other people do, and you're losing them to them already. And we won't be excited about your activities. But if your resume is a little bit short and we see not work your senior year, right? Oh, getting ready to graduate and think. Then I'm thinking, okay, could have filled that up with something. And that would have been one more job. It would end up being at the top, but that would allow the bottom oldest job, right? The job furthest away from where we are now to fit all the way to the bottom of the page.
And we can't fill it up with sprinkles. No, what do you call it?
Sparkle.
Sparkle.
Yeah, so, okay, nice. Well done. So look, follow the usual guidance, folks. We shared what those are, name and administrative stuff at the top, contact information center at the top, followed by a reverse chronological order. And then using the metadata that we spent a good bit of time on. Hopefully we fleshed that idea out for you and you understand why we're particular about that. There's a reason we just don't like it. It actually works better. We don't get paid to do what we like here at Manager Tools. We get paid to do what works better, and that's this. Your responsibilities and accomplishments while you're in college can be small. When you're at the university, it's okay. We understand we're comparing you to other university students. If you lose out to somebody who has the exact right job, that's going to happen in real life too, in adult life as well. And that just happens, and there's nothing to do to worry about that. Definitely include your non-paid work, your volunteer slots, and so on. And that gives you a lot of opportunity. If you're a sophomore or junior right now, folks, start volunteering to get those additional roles that will help you. And maybe you start small, but you can include those small jobs in a volunteer role. And if you stay for a couple of years and you get increasingly larger roles, we really like that. That shows somebody wanted to retain you and they wanted to give you more responsibilities, which means you did your previous jobs well. When we see 3 different jobs of increasing responsibilities in one organization, even if it is nonprofit, we really like that. And then lastly, hopefully we've made clear, don't include your interests. People will mislead you. Colleges will mislead you. It's partially because they want to fill up your resume and partially because they want the recruiter to be able to have something to talk about. And the recruiters say no so often in college. They think, oh, let's just chat a little bit about spelunking when I've decided I don't want this guy. No, fill it up with stuff that has value. Give them more hooks to get into a real interview with you so you have a chance to really sell them on how good you are. That's how you do a really good fresh college graduate resume.
Awesome. Thanks, my friend.
My pleasure, partner.
Thanks, everyone. That's it. We'll see you all again next week. So long.